namaskar. How are you? Nice to see you.
It's good to see you, Jimmy.
Yeah. So this may be fairly unstructured. Here's the thing: I was requested to talk about the early days at Kopan, etc., what that would be like, and so it's not that formally structured. We'll see how we go. But anyway, first I told it was supposed to be very informal, but especially since we're doing something about Kopan and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's monastery, we will definitely do the prayers and motivations at the beginning and dedications at the end. We should do that anyway, because it is a Dharma event, okay? So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By our practice of listening to the Dharma, talking about the Dharma, may we become awakened in order to benefit all sentient beings, including ourselves. Sangye chodan soki chonam ha chongchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dage jin soki pe sonam ki dola pencher sangye drupar sho sangye chodan soki chonam ha chongchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dage jin soki pe sonam ki Dola Penchir Sangye Drupar Sho. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings never be separated. No, excuse me. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, which of course are karma and klesha, are the causes of suffering. The more we understand the Four Noble Truths, the more we understand what is karma and what is klesha. Klesha has so many different translations: disturbing emotions, disturbing attitudes, delusions, etc. The more we understand that process, the more a simple prayer like that has deep meaning, because behind it, it has the entire Four Noble Truths, doesn't it? Suffering, dukkha, the cause of dukkha, karma, and klesha. May all beings never be separated from bliss, which is free from sorrow, and may all beings abide in a state of equanimity, free of the extremes of attachment and aversion, greed and hatred. Okay, so talking about the good old days at Kopan. I'm an old guy from the good old days at Kopan for sure. Big part of my life, I was there. So I'll give a little background history. A couple of things. I'll give a background history about Kopan. Many people don't even know the background history of Kopan. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he was a Sherpa, and he lived up in Solokhumbu. In his past life, he was a Sakya Lama, actually. He was a lay Lama, because Sakya Nyingma. Sakya and Nyingma are very close in terms of the Tantras, they're almost identical. In terms of the Sutra and debate and the other, the Sakya is very close to Gelug in many ways. So anyway, he was getting old, and the people begged him if he could make a school and give proper Dharma education to the Sherpa kids who were up in Solokhumbu. What's happened in Nepal is what happens in India. It becomes more and more Hinduized up there. It's like pretty soon that they lose their language. Everything is done in Hindi. And after time, there's no more Dharma teachings, etc. So it's very, very important that there was a school set up where they could get a classical education, like as Buddhists, Buddhist education. And so he was unable to fulfill that promise in that life because he was old. So in this present life, he started the process. First, he tried to have a school up in Laudo, but Laudo, as you know, maybe some of you, it's way, way, way up, in Solokhumbu area. And it wasn't very practical to build a school up there that was that big, etc. So they decided to build Kopan Monastery, and then that would be all the Sherpa kids could come down there and they could live in Nepal. I mean, live down in the valley more. And so that's what happened. And so that was the beginnings of Kopan. That was the purpose of Kopan, is to have a school for educating young Sherpa kids. And it still does that pretty much. Most of the young monks there are Sherpas, and probably now there's a nunnery below, and most of the nuns there are probably Sherpas as well, I would think. So I'm not sure about that. I know with respect to nuns, the Tibetan nunneries, the ones that we know that are very famous, they're most of the nuns, the really top nuns, are not the Tibetans. They are the ones from Kinor and from Ladakh and these other places. They're very sincere. Annie Tenzin Palmo's nunnery, that's the way it is. They're mostly from there. Also, Doma Ling up in Dharamsala, where I've lived for years, although I'm exiled now. I'm in America, and then et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, the whole purpose was building the school, and it was a long process. It was very, very difficult, and it ended up becoming also this place where Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche began to teach. If you get a chance, if maybe you've read the book called Big Love. It's this big thing. I don't have it with me because I'm in traveling. It weighs about 5 kgs, and it's a beautiful book, and it goes all about the history of Lama Yeshe and and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and which of course at the beginning includes the building of the school, how Lama Yeshe met Lama Zopa Rinpoche in Buxa. You see, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he had to leave Solo Khumbu and go to Tibet to get an education. Same thing, he was a Sherpa. There was no place for him to get educated. So he went to Tibet with his uncle when he was very young and ended up there and actually escaped from Tibet and came back. So you have all of the background of the building of Kopan. It's very nicely, beautiful history at the beginning of this big love book. I read the whole part right up to my first course was 1974, the seventh course. So I read everything that happened before I was there, and then after that, I was there. And this is kind of the things you would like me to talk about, but I'm giving you a little background. So wonderful, wonderful background to the building of Kopan Monastery and becoming a school. So my connection with it was, I already had a connection with Nepal. I left America to go to India and Nepal in 1971. So I went to Europe, and then I went to Spain, Ibiza, then across to the Greek islands, etc. It was this whole journey across through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, etc., all the way to Nepal. That was my first journey. But the first journey, I never went to Kopan. I'd already met two of my friends, actually three in the end, had become very serious Buddhist monks in the Chinese tradition. This is in the 60s, in the middle of the 60s, when it was all just drugs, sex, rock and roll, drug, sex, jazz. In my case, they became very serious monks in the Chinese tradition. And so I knew when I met them that I was going to be a monk someday, but I didn't feel as connected with the Chinese tradition, particularly with that branch of it. It was so strict. They took the vow to never lie down. They sat up all night, full lotus. They slept, but in full lotus position, leaning against a wall, et cetera, et cetera. And that was pretty tough. And so I knew then, and I knew I was going to India from when I was a child. I might have told this story before. I was in a bookstore with my mama when I was a young boy, and there was a book called Autobiography of a Yogi, a very famous book that everybody's read. I saw that, who is Yogi, what's India, and this is where I have to go. I had to be past life, so knew I was going, but I waited till the 60s died out because they were very rich. They weren't just a stoned out time. They were rich culturally, musically, culturally, in many ways, politically. Then I took off in 1971, and I ended up in Nepal. And but at that time I didn't know about any Kopan course. I was open to Dharma. I used to make kora around the Swayambhu stupa, and I used to go to the pujas up in Swayambhu, and there was a strong connection. It was so alive there in Nepal. But when I left India that trip, I wasn't there all that long. It wasn't even a full year. I felt like I wasted my time because I didn't get involved with the Dharma. Yeah, I did it. Here I was in India. I was all involved with trekking and my girlfriend in Zopa, et cetera, and I wasn't really involved with the Dharma. So I vowed I will come back, and I will come back for Dharma. And already I kind of knew it was Buddhist, although they have a nice connection with Hinduism. And so I went back and was working. And then I knew I wanted to go back. I didn't know which Lama, where to go. I had no idea, but I made prayers that I would meet my teacher, meet my gurus. So I was working in Seattle, and my close friend who I went across with the first time was working in the Bay Area, and he'd become a Sufi. And he says, "Hey, do you want to go to a Sufi camp with Pirvalaya Khan in Chamonix, up in the French Alps, which was and it would be a nice way doing the transition from job, getting back into India, getting more in an Indian mind state." So at that work camp, I went to the work camp because me and a friend of mine who I was traveling with at the time, we couldn't afford to hang around in Chamonix in France. We would have used up all of our money. So we went to the work camp, and during the work camp, there was a poster. There was a poster, 7th Kopan course, Lama Tupten Yeshe, Lama Tupten Zopa, Rinpoche, Kopan Monastery, Nepal. And I went, that's it. That's it. I'm going there. I'm going to that place, That me, I thought about it, and then somehow it just connected, even just seeing this poster. Because I was looking, I don't know where I was going to go and pursue Buddha Dharma. My first trip, I didn't get to many Buddhist places. It was just between Nepal and India and Varanasi, etc. So then I went overland with a few people who decided to do the same thing. And we went overland again. We went from the Greek islands to Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and we made it all the way, like 22 days camping, going overland. Wow. To get to Nepal. And so one friend I went with the first time, and we became very close. We were determined to go to the Kopan course, which we didn't know anything about at that time. So anyway, we signed up for the Kopan course, and then a couple of these other friends that were kind of hardcore Sufis, one of my old friend who suggested going to Sufi camp, they didn't make it through the first 2 days of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he was teaching the first 3 weeks. He taught the hell realms. He taught the 8 worldly dharmas. He taught about how Atisha was a prince from Bengal who had a house with 100,000 swimming pools, and how he was the one who brought to Tibet. And it was like, they just said, when they started going on about the hell realms, there's only Lamas over can go around the hell realms. It was like, wow, they were saying, we're out of here. Our path is about peace and love. It's not about hells and da 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 da. So they blew out, but another couple of people did the course and got very much into it, along with myself and my other friend from Canada. So yeah, it was a very intense experience. Back then at Kopan, they didn't have a gompa that would hold everybody. It was a big tent, a very crude tent. And there was more than 200 people. More than 200 people went. The toilets were just out on the hill with 2 boards with a great view looking out over the valley as you squat. Yeah, it was pretty funky, Kopan, it wasn't even really completed. And there was the Gompa was there, but the Gompa wouldn't hold even, a quarter of that many people. So it was 200 people in the tent with Lamas Zopa Rinpoche every day. And then there was a Westerner who was the one leading the meditations and thing. That at that time, that was Nick Rebush, quite famous guy. He became a monk at the time. They always had a Westerner who did all the aspects of the course. And it was full on. It was full on intense. But then there was a whole experience that was like, and it still is for people. I can't imagine it be as, yeah, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Sorry, when I say Lama Zopa Rinpoche, don't think I'm not being respectful. Back then, from the depths of our hearts, we said Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe. That was as high as you could get. It wasn't, no, you didn't have to say Rinpoche, Kyabje, Omniscient Lord, the 3 times. It was totally, and also that's what Lama Yeshe says. He called him Lama Zopa. You go ask Lama Zopa, so I don't mean that as being lack of respect. Some people these days might, because from my heart, when I say Lama Zopa, I usually add on the Rinpoche now, but in Lama Yeshe. So it's a very intense experience, and they still are. So, it was up at a ridiculously early hour. The food was really horrible, but it was, that course cost 300 rupees for 30 days. It was 10 rupees a day. Nepalese rupees, that's worth even less than. And so, yeah, you got, pretty basic stuff, but pretty amazing to have it go for that. And so, yeah, it was quite a stirring. Lama Zopa Rinpoche kind of stirring everybody. Actually, Lama Yeshe kind of called him the shots behind the back. He was actually the one orchestrating, but Lama Zopa was the one up there driving everybody crazy. Who could take it? And then a lot of people would leave, and they still do maybe. And I used to think, why is he doing all? Why is he talking about the hell realms in a very graphic way and starting out with so much of that? People are going to bounce off that, but somehow with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, sometimes it's a way that he's just bringing out the people that might be serious. Because Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whenever he was teaching, and even no matter what his language was like, he has something going, had some power going underneath, like the water melting the ice. There was some power there that was compelling, and people connected with it or they didn't. And so everybody I know didn't scare them off. It didn't scare them off at all to go through all that about the hell realms and all that about you do on and on and on and on and on for like from almost most of the course. And then of course the second half of the course, they still do this today. We did the Mahayana precepts, 1 meal a day. It was intense. And there's something extremely valuable about doing a whole month. Coming and doing a shorter course, it just doesn't go as deep. And the same way with doing retreats. We should all do retreats. Lama Yeshe says we should all do a minimum of a couple of months per year. When I was a monk, he said 2 months per year minimum, you should do retreat. But everybody should do retreat. Because when you do a retreat, you have a chance to go really deep into your practice because you just go on and then the daily life is about kind of keeping it at maintenance level, doing your sadhanas and your commitments every day, etc., like that. But that course it was definitely a retreat. It was definitely a retreat. It was a intense experience, to say the least. Yeah, with Rinpoche for 30 days. Yeah, it was quite amazing. And it really went deep. It just changed people's lives. And so it's almost, you have the class. That was the 7th class, 1984. I came back the next year. I was in India for like 4 years, India, Nepal, going between Nepal and India. So I did that 7th course. I did the 8th course. I did the 9th course. That's 74, 75, 76, etc. And during those days, I would oscillate between Kopan and McLeodganj, Tushita, already. It became my pattern. In those days, it was dictated by visas. You couldn't get a visa. Visas was everything. You could only get a 3-month visa. And then you might get that extended for 3 months. And then you'd have to go to these great high lamas like Ling Rinpoche to get them all. Where can I get my extension? Should I go to Rishikesh? Should I go to Jammu? These great beings. It was all about visas and now we're trying to be able to stay and finish your retreats and stay in India. So the way I had to do it is I could do 3 months and get another 3 in Nepal. Then I'd go to the next place, Sri Lanka, out, and then I get a new passport in each place, $10. and new passport in Nepal, $10, and then started again. And then I went to Afghanistan, started again. So that's how I got the time in India, by getting a $10 new passport and starting again each time. And it was such a struggle for people with the visas, you know. Wow. And then in India, Commonwealth people, people who came from England, Canada, New Zealand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they could stay forever without even having to get a visa at all. It was like, wow, that's why there's so many of the old students and the original monks from Kopan, from Dharamsala, had Commonwealth passports. Geshe Nawandarge, the great master who taught at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in the early days. And he was more than just a Geshe. He was one of the great Geshes, but he also was a yogi and meditated like Gen Rabden, who I'll talk about subsequently, Geshe Rabden. I'll go when we go back to Kopan a little bit. And that's mostly what we're doing this talk about it. What happened was like a Kopan, that was the request. So Geshe Nawandarge, when he's teaching the precious human rebirth, right? He says there's not 10 endowments, there's 11 endowments. The 11th endowment is a Commonwealth passport. You need to have you have to be born in freedom from the hells, freedom from all the realms. You needed all these conditions. And you had to have all these richnesses or endowments. And one of them was this passport that you could stay. Not only you met the Dharma was still alive, but you had a visa so you could stay and hear it without having to go out all the time. So that's how much this drama was about staying. So anyway, the course is, amazing phenomenon. All the people that came every year. It was a lot of were travelers. A lot were kind of still hippies and smoking dope. We came there to kind of all check out this course with these lamas up on the hill. Nepal was a paradise for legal dope smoking and beautiful culture. It was an incredible place. It was an incredible place. And it's so tied up, the fact that Kopan was Nepal in Kathmandu. It's not just it would happen there. It was just being in Nepal, in Lama Zopa Rinpoche's Nepalese. And all the little kids running around are Sherpas. Yeah, they're all Nepalese. So it's so tied up with Nepal. And then all of us people who came to Nepal, and it was this beautiful place. And it was the longest we'd ever gone in the last 5 years without having a joint was when we went to this course for 1 month, et cetera, et cetera. And it was kind of funny in that way. And then it was always used as an example for teaching. It's so important, and I use these examples still. Anything to do with the Dharma should be based on shunyata, shouldn't it? Based on emptiness. I mean, if this was a formal teaching, I would have read the Heart Sutra like I did for the Four Noble Truths. The Heart Sutra, you keep in mind emptiness. You don't let the Dharma become self-existent. The Heart Sutra says no ear, no eye, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation, no path. So you don't make the Dharma self-existent. You are very aware of keeping everything in with shunyata. Everything that is done in emptiness. Otherwise, it ceases to become Dharma. And so one of the greatest examples for this is proving emptiness is Nepal, Kathmandu. Kathmandu, for some people, they would come there and they would go, oh my God, this is the shitty. You get off a plane from Switzerland. Oh my God, this place is the most sick, disease, disgusting place, pig street, shit all over the streets. Every endemic disease in the world, it was the number one, along with a country in Africa, to have the most illnesses. And they would go, oh, this place is just horrible. What a horrible country. And they would turn around and go back screaming to Switzerland or try to find a nice place in India. And then there was people like me and so many others. We came, this is the most beautiful place ever. wow, we didn't even look at the dirt. We looked at, it was like, there was temples everywhere. It was the people. It was, you just saw it as a pure land. It is like, Nepal was a pure land back then. There weren't any cars. Can you imagine being in Kathmandu? Now it's one of the most polluted cities in the world. You would walk from Bodh up to Kopan and it was just a dirt track. Now it's all more building. But for quite a few years, there weren't cars. The trucks that brought up Indian goods came up and parked outside the post office, but all of the streets in Kathmandu, there were no cars. There was rickshaws and little temples, and yeah, what a place. No cars or motorbikes. So what a difference. It was a pure land as far as I was concerned. And it was very conducive for Dharma in that respect. Everywhere was Dharma. There's this beautiful, and it was beautiful for me because having first connected with I didn't connect with the Chinese Buddhism. It was incredible. I saw it as being incredibly, it's pure, absolutely. They were very pure. But I connected with Tibetan Buddhism because it's closer connected to India, has this India connection. You could even say it has a connection with Hinduism in a way, but it's connected. It's very different. It's very clear. Atman, the name of the Buddha, the fundamental thing that makes something Buddhist is anatma, no atman, no permanent, partless, and independent self, separate from the body and mind, isn't it? So in that sense, completely separate. But when you get into the tantras and all the images, so in Nepal, it was a Buddhist country and a Hindu country. They did a census once when I was there. The national census of Nepal was that 95% of the people were Hindu and 45% were Buddhist. That's the way they filled it out. Because so many people were just both, you know. And you walked around Nepal, you had these, you've probably been to Nepal, some of you. There were these Shiva lingams, and out of the Shiva lingams are the five Dhyani Buddhas, the four Dhyani Buddhas coming out of the Shiva lingam. And that isn't something degenerate. The Nuaris, the main tribe there in Nepal that was so cultured, were actually Buddhist, the Wari Buddhist. And most of the Tankas, they're very known for their art and their architecture, are painted still by Nuar, Nepalese Buddhists. So they had a deep tradition of Buddha Dharma and many holy places there. Padmasambhava was there, Milarepa was there, etc., etc., etc. Atisha was there. All of them. It was like one great pilgrimage. Not to mention all the great lamas of the time. So that's the background. And that was very much a part of things as you did this intense course with Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Yeah. You don't know if he was torturing you on purpose or not, you know? Yeah, I think he did like to push buttons and bring up the eye so people could have something to look at. Yeah, it was very, very funny. And Lama, yeah, he's the puppet master. He's not even there. So it's always, we always do Lama Zopa. We go on and on and on with hell realms and hell realms and hell realms. And, you know, you're going to go to hell and your permanent address is the lower realms. That was one of his favorite sayings, you know, like, because you've been born countless times, but most of the births are lower births and most of them are hell realms. So that's your permanent address. That's pretty tough for a lot of people coming from the West. And, you know, so I don't know. I never had trouble with hell realms, especially because Buddhism, everything comes from the mind, doesn't it? It comes from the mind. That's not just the mind only school, but in Buddhism in general, everything comes from our mind. So we project in the same way we can project on Kathmandu as being a hell realm or a heavenly realm. We project on it. We project on that base. And so it's coming from our mind. Somebody else sees it as a heaven, somebody else sees it as a hell. So they're being projected by our minds. Traditionally, the hell realms, and it's very explicitly, are created by anger, isn't it? I think it even says in the Bodhisattva Avatar, you want to know where the hells are? They're a mind of anger. The burning fires of hell are the burning fire of anger, which envelops your mind with anger and rage. Even they measure people when they're angry. They can't taste their food. They can't see more than 20 yards. They're blind with rage, or they have an expression. That's quite literal, And so, yeah, the hell realms come from anger, and the ghost realms come from, each comes from a different delusion. Hungry ghosts from great greed, and the animal realms come from stupidity. The human realms from, mostly desire, and the God realms pride, and the anti-gods jealousy. So they're all based on that. So when you study Buddha Dharma from the beginning, when you realize from day one, this is about your mind. The first thing that Lamas Yeshe ever said in a course, he says, this course is about you. It's about mind, but it's about your mind. It's not about mind as some topic, it's your mind. This course that you're taking is about your mind, your mind. You're working on your mind. You're trying to subdue your mind, The bottom line of practicing Dharma is subduing your mind. So when you see it that way, you don't take it so concrete. That means you're seeing a little bit with emptiness. Everything's coming from mind. It's not coming from its existent from its own side. That includes hell realms. That includes the whole situation, everything in Dharma. That's why it's very important that we always have that in mind, that everything is empty. Whatever we do, whatever practice we do, we see it in that sense. And that's a lot of what was taught. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaches. Excuse me. Anyway, Lama Tubten Yeshe, he was the one I have deepest connection with. He was my root guru, although now Rinpoche is my root guru. But yeah, Lama Yeshe, first time I met Lama Yeshe was at Kopan, of course. But it was Rinpoche coming. He was the one coming and doing the teachings. So then the first night that Lama Yeshe comes running into the tent, the very first time when we were introduced him, first time I ever saw him, it was like, Rinpoche's been teaching hell realms. He's been teaching 8 worldly dharmas, on and on and on, and about how attachment is the problem. Attachment is the root of samsara. Attachment's negative, 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 negative. Attachment's negative. Yeah, you get too attached, you'll go to hell, etc., etc. And so, what is Lama Yeshe runs in, and he sits down and he says, "Who says attachment's all bad?" And everybody goes, "Yeah, I like the fat Lama better than the skinny one. He's sounding a little more reasonable." And Lama Yeshe says, if you didn't have attachment, someone didn't have attachment, you wouldn't have this precious human rebirth. Mom and dad wouldn't have given birth to you if there wasn't any attachment. He'd just take the whole thing from another angle, but Lama Yeshe very much understands that attachment's the root of samsara. He just throws it another way for a minute, he just, it's not so concrete, because people can build up attachment, and you get religious fanatics. Rinpoche's not a religious fanatic. He may sound like it, but he's not. He understands what's going on. He sees it all in emptiness. He doesn't take it so seriously. People go to him with their attachment problems, and he goes, "Well, yeah, come on, get over it." They're always relationship stuff. So anyway, yeah, that was the first. And as soon as he ran in there and gave a talk, I knew he was my root Lama somehow. Bam. You're supposed to check for a long time. You don't just take someone as your teacher, but for me, it was instantaneous. Because it can be dangerous for me, it wasn't, but if you just meet someone and says, "Oh yeah, they're my guru," and you get blown out by them the first time, then it turns out later they might be degenerate. It can be very impressive, especially when you're projecting things onto them. I don't think I was even capable of projecting anything onto Lama Yeshe. He came in and he was just like, something else, But the Kopan courses, I associate much more with Rinpoche, as he was the one teaching them. So you can help me as we go through this. Is there any aspects of what was there you'd like to ask questions about? Any curiosities about what happened with the Lamas and with the teachings? But I will go because Rinpoche spent a whole long time with the 8 worldly Dharmas. This is Dharma. This is not Dharma. And it's very important, isn't it? We understand. What are the worldly Dharmas? We should all be able to list them off. There's pleasure and pain. We want pleasure, we don't want pain. We want gain, we don't want loss. We want praise, we don't want blame. We want good reputation, we don't want bad reputation, euphony and defamation. These are the 8 worldly Dharmas, and we would go through them again and again and again and again. And you come to the conclusion that, hey, I'm completely impure. Completely impure. Everything I do is wanting some little bit of pleasure and wanting to be free from pain. Everything I do is wanting a little gain and wanting a little good reputation, etc. Even if we're not driven by it, to be free of it, wow, that's something quite deep. And then, as we know from the Heart Sutra, all those things that we would grasp at, they don't exist truly. As I taught when I taught the Four Noble Truths with you people, it was like we read the Heart Sutra and I taught a bit of the Heart Sutra. And when we go through all those categories of sacred things of Buddha Dharma, and also the senses, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, and the Four Noble Truths, no suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, 12 legs, everything empty, which we grasp. And then the final one, which is so powerful and so important, there is no attainment and there is no non-attainment. There's nothing to attain. There's nothing to get and there's nothing to not get. And then there's the line. When the person realizes, when the yogi realizes that there's no attainment, the bodhisattva realizes there's no attainment, he overcomes all fear, which is such a good, we discussed that when we did that teaching, didn't we? Fear, So we have fear. And it's not until we realize the highest level, the meaning of the Heart Sutra, emptiness, we will have fear. And the 8 worldly Dharmas is the source of fear, isn't it? Going between the Dharmas is hope, false hope, not the real, is fear. Afraid I won't get what I want. Afraid I'll get what I don't want. Afraid won't get pleasure. Afraid I'll get pain. Afraid I won't get praise. Afraid I'll get praise. Afraid I won't get praise. Afraid I'll get blame. All of those are dealing with fear. Fear runs through those 8 worldly Dharmas throughout. So that's the source of it. So yeah, everything we do is 8 worldly Dharmas, but we try to understand what is a worldly Dharma and what's not a worldly Dharma. And that can be very, very worthwhile because we get attached to gurus, we get attached to the path, we get attached to all kinds of spiritual paraphernalia. One of the great books, one of the first books written by Trungpa Rinpoche, who was pretty controversial. You could say he was pretty degenerate, but on the other hand, great teachings. And the first book he wrote was my first books was Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. The spiritual path itself became something to be attached to and to something to be jealous over. And you see it all the time, sectarianism between the sects, Kargu, Gelug, you don't escape it when you get it in a monastery. You don't escape it between this. It's still the same games are coming. The same games are the same 8 worldly Dharmas. Attachment is the root, but remember, Lama Yeshe was trying to put a little bit of space there, and that it's slowly, dear. He used to say, you come to the deeper realizations here. Slowly, slowly, you become less attached. Slowly, slowly, more space. So we would meditate on those, and he taught those daily. The 8 worldly dharmas, very important. Very, very important. I want to see here. Okay, we still have a lot of time. I'm not using up all the time. I'm talking too fast. So we have to expand out a bit, tell more stories, or keep bringing the Dharma into it. And then other things that happened even in that first course, and we can go on to other courses, what happened during that time. I don't know, you've probably heard this many, many times, but one of the things you heard again and again, Kopan, Taya Tao Mune Mune Maha Mune So. That's what we would be chanting, chanting, and chanting. And if the Lama doesn't come, if he comes an hour late, we sit and chant that one. And it was that way of chanting. It's just that's Kopan, That's the way we did there. And it continues over probably into all the centers because everything came from Kopan, didn't it? When Lama Yeshe was at Kopan, he came up with the idea for the FBMT. The FBMT came completely from Lama Yeshe. And so that emanated out of Kopan. It's interesting that Lozang asked to talk about Kopan and things because, wow, that's so important. That's the root center. So the FPMT came from Kopan. Lama Yeshe was the one who started Dharma centers. Of course, after he passed, they were probably continued. And he also started the IMI for the monks. The monks and nuns, the first monks and nuns in the FPMT were all their students at Kopan. When I came in 1974, they were ordained in 1973. The oldest ones, Nick and Sangha Kadro. Most of them aren't monks and nuns anymore, but Sangha Kadro, Yeshe Kadro, they're still definitely nuns. And Dr. Nick and Marcel, they were all the Tupten Pande. They were all ordained the year before. So I met them there. And so from them, you get to knowing them, the stories about how things went there at Kopan. And they got inspired to get ordained from taking the Kopan course. They decided they would get ordained. And so by the time I came there were a lot of them. And then when I was there, ones like Tupten Children, she was still cherry green. She wasn't ordained yet. There was a lot of them. That then came the next class, Dr. Adrian, who's known as, come on, help me. Yeah, there was a whole group of them there that were ordained. And the year I was there, so out of Kopan came all the Sangha. And so Lama Yeshe, he started the IMI, International Mahayana Institute, to take care of Sangha. Lama Yeshe took his commitments very seriously. It's the commitment of an abbot, a preceptor, whoever ordains you. They're responsible for you. They're even responsible for paying your bills and making sure you get robes, etc. They take that responsibility. If you can't get it from somewhere else, they take the responsibility. And Lama Yeshe said, that's my responsibility. How can I take care of all my monks and nuns? How can I do it? So he started an organization called IMI that would have sources of money to help with all that stuff. Because Lama, there's no way he could do that. I know another friend of mine, when he was ordained by the great Taratuku. Taratuku was a great Lama. Maybe you've heard of him. He passed a few years ago. He was abbot of Kopan Monastery back when it was up in Bamdala. very famous. And we took many teachings from him. He was a teacher of mine in Bulgaria. And after he ordained this friend of mine, when he took his Gelong especially, he says, now I'm responsible for you. You know, if you need anything, you come to me. It's my responsibility. But that kind of went out the window a lot sometimes in some places, didn't it? But our gurus took it very seriously. Lama Yeshe took it very seriously. So he created an organization to make sure we were okay. The monks and nuns were okay. And then he created the FPMT so that there would be Dharma centers in the West. So when people went to the West, they weren't lost. They had some center to go to. Because people come and go to Kopan, they get all caught up in Nepal and everything is happy, holy, easy in Nepal. And all of a sudden they go back to the West and they go to their place and it's like they're swimming, they're drowning, because here I am back in the same connections trying to practice Dharma in the West. Not easy. That's what the purpose of the Dharma centers. Isn't it, Lozong? You're there in New Mexico so that people can have a place they can come. Ideally, they do. Ideally, they see that, you know. And then people come back after being in India. Well, you know, they go back to a monastery or a Dharma center. So, yeah, that's the purpose. And that was all Lama Yeshe's idea. It wasn't just to propagate the Dharma and have 10 million centers. It was having a place where people could continue getting teachings and continue giving teachings and continue to practice when they left this perfect situation of the East. And they found themselves back in their own culture. That's the purpose of Dharma centers. The first ones, because Dr. Nick and there were a lot of Australians back in those early days. Dr. Nick was one of the big ones. The Yeshe Kadro was the attendant of the nun. And in fact, Dr. Nick and Yeshe Kadro, they used to be boyfriend and girlfriend. There was a lot of that, you know, boom, boom. They both came there, became monk and nun. And so they were connected. And Dr. Nick, he was a doctor. And so he had good connections. And some of them had money. So they took the money and they bought land up in Queensland. And that was the first overseas Dharma center, was Australia, because the Australians were the ones who were there first, you know. And so you had Australians, and you still had a lot of Australians in the FPMT. We even used to call it the Australian Mafia run the FPMT. The rest of us, you know, it's too many Australians. Yeah, they ran everything. It's like you have Roger, Venerable Roger, and Don, Holly, Australia, you know. And yeah, especially if you're coming from the Latin, from the Italian culture, you know. There's too many English and too many Australians, and they all kind of poo-pooed the Italians like they were kind of stupid. Actually, Italians were better educated. More of them spoke Tibetan. It was kind of funny, kind of opposite. So, and then America, centers came in America. Started with Vajrapani. So the main thing about those centers was intensity. And then the last 2 weeks, you took the Mahayana precepts. I think they still do that. And we realized the importance of that. And some people were sneaking down the hill, I think, to go get pies and things like that. People were dreaming of food. Kathmandu was a place where there were pie shops back then. I mean, now it's everywhere, but back then there was a few places. So, and then it got to be very clear that what is samsara, you know? People would think Kopan is not samsara, Kathmandu is samsara. People have this idea still. They have samsara is like New York, or samsara is where we live. Samsara is this realm of the United States or France or whatever, all the stuff we do. That's not samsara. It's just, it's not quite like that. We have to keep it in mind. So that's samsara down there. No, samsara and nirvana are one in one sense. They go down there because they think eating pie is samsara. Well, eating pie is what you make it, isn't it? You know. So some of those principles becoming very, very clear. Can you people here answer? Can anybody say what is the strict definition of samsara? What it is? The gross definition is these 6 realms of desire, or that it's downtown, or that it's drug, sex, and rock and roll. That's samsara. No, that's not samsara. But as you know, if you studied, samsara is the 5 aggregates that are appropriated under the power of delusion and karma, isn't it? That's definitive samsara. It's not a place. We're not in samsara like downtown or Kathmandu. This thing, there's a message to change a password from it keeps blocking the whole screen. So yeah, and so just starting to understand principles like that, because when people get new in the Dharma, oh, that's just samsara, Nepal, down there, samsara, I don't want to samsara, I don't want to go back to America, that's samsara. And that had to be taught. No, it isn't, samsara is your mind. Lama Yeshe says this course is about your mind. That's what it's about, and understanding our mind and how we create this stuff. That's the importance of having an intensive 1-month course, to understand the fundamentals and hope they stay with us. One of my main things is I give a Tara retreat, and still we do twice a week, we do a Tara practice. And that's one of my main things. I've taught a lot of full courses. Now Tushita, they were up to over 100 people. And I've taught courses at Kopan also. I've taught at Kopan and given retreats. Not a very good place to do a 10-day retreat because it's too noisy with all the little monks. It's not a quiet place, Kopan. What was I going to say with respect to that? I kind of lost the track for a second there, if I can backtrack. So anyway, what Rinpoche was teaching through the whole time, you may not realize you were being taught that. One of the most important things he was teaching is how to expand your positive karma. How to make positive karma, how to make merit. Rinpoche is about making merit. He's merit. Purify. I don't like the word, but it's okay. We know what it means. Whether you want to call it whether you want to call it give it some children name like there's a whole bunch of terms that get used for all these things now that sound better. Spiritual momentum and things like that. So anyway, he was always teaching how to do that in the teachings. So let's take some basic practice. And this is what I like to do when I give these Tara retreats. I brought in the whole 3 Kayas practice from Hatha Yoga Tantra and the Heart Sutra and understanding the Heart Sutra. Emptiness has to be there from the beginning, emptiness. So going through the 7-limb practice, right? Prostration. We should do prostrations in emptiness. Rinpoche taught that right away. You're doing a prostration. You stand there and you visualize all of on your right is your father and all male sentient beings going right down to the animals. On your left is your mother and all female women sentient beings going down to the insects, etc. And you are leading them all into prostration. It's not just you prostrating. And then he taught everything. It's called the circle of the 3, which means when you prostrate, you do it in emptiness. You see that the object you're prostrating to, we'll say it's the Buddha. And you, the person doing the prostration, and the act of doing the prostrations are interdependent, meaning they're empty. There's things empty of a prostration. There's only a prostration comes together because of it's a dependent arising, and emptiness mean the same thing, don't they? We should always keep this in mind. because so many people go off on a thing about emptiness. It sounds like nihilism, oh, black dada nihilism. Dependent arising and emptiness are the same, but they're not quite exact the same, but they are the same. Emptiness means empty of what? Empty of independent self. In fact, the Buddha didn't teach 4 schools of tenets. He just taught there's no separate individual self. That's all he taught. And that means that there's not an independent, there's a dependent one. Independent on what? The self or anything else is dependent on its parts. It's dependent on causes and conditions. It's dependent on us or somebody knowing it. And at the deepest, subtlest level, it's depending on naming. That gets into a whole other level of philosophy, doesn't it? Mere imputation. So we're doing a prostration, and this is how we should practice everything. And this is what we do in these Tara retreats that I do. It's really, really important to bring it in all the time, because we go through the 7 limb prayer, and one of the first ones is prostration. And Rinpoche called it circle of the 3. When we prostrate, always think circle of the 3. The object you're prostrating to, the prostrated and the act of prostration are all interdependent. Therefore, it's empty. They're empty. So you're doing it in emptiness. It's not self-existent Jimi or I is prostrating to a self-existent Buddha statue or the Buddha and the act of prostrating. No, it's all interdependent. The whole thing is done in emptiness, and this makes it much, much more vast, much, much more powerful, much, much more deep. This is the way to practice. He was always teaching how to practice. It wasn't just philosophy. How to make more merit. Merit, he loves it. He loves it. I remember they were building a big prayer wheel. He loves all this kind of, he likes the prayer wheels. And they were building a giant prayer wheel at the Land of Medicine Buddha. And they were putting in microfiche of mantras. So they could put in how many 100,000 million mantras on microfiche. It doesn't count to do it digitally. You can't just put a hard disk in there. It doesn't count. It has to be there, you know. Just like a mantra should be said. You don't really do mantra silently. There's deeper ways you bring it down to the lower chakra. That's different. When you're reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, you should be reciting it, not out loud. In fact, you shouldn't even recite it so loud that you're disturbing your neighbor under your breath. But all the people with time to do the mantra, they just sit there and they go, no, you have to say the mantra. It's said. So all of these practices that we were doing, and Rinpoche does, and they're taught, most of them are contained in the 7 limb prayer, aren't they? The 7 limb puja. And it's so important. That's why I like to put all of these elements. I hope some of you can join sometime for one of these Tara retreats or Chenrezig. But in this, what we do is from here, and we'll come up, a couple of courses later is one where Lama Yeshe gave his first initiation, and that was Tara. But for the sake of what Rinpoche was teaching, all these practices like prostrating, we make mandala offerings lots, we would do all those things. Offerings, he taught about making offerings and how you always multiply them. You do them in the circle of the 3. The object to whom you're offering, you offering, and the act of offering. There's no offering that takes place. Offering is empty. It's dependent on those 3 parts. And that makes everything open and spacious. Otherwise, the whole Dharma practice becomes concrete me, concrete Buddha. That's why the Buddha in the Heart Sutra went through all the different holy, sacred things of Buddhism and said, no, 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 meaning not independent. They're dependent. Otherwise, we start grasping after the Dharma. We start grasping after gurus. We see everything as self-existent. We're lost. That's why Trungpa called this first book Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. We turn the whole path into material, not just bells and dorjies and spiritual materialism, but making the whole thing another acquisition. My Dharma practice, my guru is better than your guru. I mean, it's endless. It's endless. Getting attached to our teachers, etc., etc. So it's so important to keep those fundamental things there all the time. So one of them is that. And so maybe I'll just bring that in right now, the 7 limb prayer. Are all of you familiar with the 7 limb prayer? prostration, offerings, confession. I hate the word confession, but confession, rejoicing, praying that you meet the Guru, and that he remains, dedication, etc. The seven limb prayer. It's the root of the Dharma. And all of these things come from the great Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. There's 8 great bodhisattvas, aren't there? There's Maitreya, there's Manjushri, there's Chenrezig, there's Vajrapani, Kshitigarbha, Kashyagarbha, Sarvanivarana, Vishkambini, but one of them, and one of the most important one, is Samantabhadra. So Lama Zopa was teaching Samantabhadra's doing way, and that's you multiply it. That's another way of doing it. And when I gave this teaching, I'll give it every time I teach, the importance of practicing according to Samantabhadra's way. You want to make merit, Samantabhadra. Read the King of Prayers. The King of Prayers is just, the seven limb puja prayer comes from the King of Prayers. That's all Samantabhadra, the Avatamsaka Sutra. Yeah, and see, everything is mind expanding. You read the King of Prayers, you probably have how it multiplies. On every, I might even have a copy of it here. I could read a couple of lines anyway to remind you of the spirit of it. I usually have one handy. So yeah, Heart Sutra. Maybe. And all these things were introduced in one intense way at Kopan Monastery. I don't know if I have a copy of King of Prayers right here. I don't think so. Not this particular station.
We just shared the King of Prayers PDF in the chat.
Okay. In which chat? Oh, so everybody has a copy.
Yes.
Except me. Can I read it in the chat?
Yes, you can.
How do I go? I go to chat down here. I go to the bottom and push a button. Oh, here's chat. Boom. Then what do I do after I hit?
You should see King of Prayers and then click to open it.
Got it. Thank you. I love somebody who knows what they're doing. I didn't remember. So the King of Prayers is all about Samantabhadra's way of expanding your mind. All about that. And so everything is more expanded, more and more. So I'll just read through the seven limb prayer, and then because the seven limb practice that we do in every Tibetan monastery, all 4 schools, all comes from Samantabhadra, and the first one is right here. This King of Prayers is just a tiny little bit of the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is thousands of pages. It's from the Ganda of Yuha, which is actually just the last part. I bow down to the youthful Arya Manjushri, you lions amongst humans, gone to freedom in the present, past, and future. In the worlds of 10 directions, to all of you with body, speech, and mind, and since body, speech, and sincere mind, I bow down. With the energy of aspiration for the Bodhisattva way, with a sense of deep respect, and with as many bodies as atoms of the world. See, here's how it's prostrating. I'm as many bodies as not just my body who's prostrating, with as many bodies as all the atoms of the world I'm prostrating. See, you've already multiplied you prostrating times countless bodies, And so that's a way of expanding. And to all of you Buddhas visualized as real, I bow down. On every atom are Buddhas as numberless as atoms, each amidst a host of bodhisattvas. And I am confident the sphere of all phenomena is entirely filled with Buddhas in this way. With infinite oceans of praise for you and oceans of sound from the aspects of my voice, I sing the breathtaking excellence of Buddhas and celebrate all of you gone to bliss. And then here we have the offerings. Beautiful flowers and regal garlands, sweet music, scented oils and parasols, sparkling lights and sublime incense, I offer to you, victorious ones. Fine dress and fragrant perfume, sandalwood powder heaped high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings in spectacular array, I offer to you, victorious ones. With transcendent offerings, peerless and vast, with profound admiration for all Buddhas, with strength of conviction in the Bodhisattva way, I offer and bow down to all the victorious ones. So that's offerings, and now there's confession, for lack of a better word. Every harmful action I have done with my body, speech, and mind, overwhelmed by attachment, anger, and confusion, all of these I openly lie before you. And this is exactly the Tibetan meaning. The meaning isn't confession. Well, confession, okay, but confession is so tied up with Catholicism that so many people come out of that tradition and they bounce off of it. But there's nothing wrong with it calling it confession. But it means to bring it up and make it known. Confessing something is to bring it up. Don't keep it inside. And that's one of the positive qualities of Catholicism. Bring it up. Don't just walk around with all this stuff inside. Confess it, bring it out. It helps to bring it out, and that way, otherwise it's always festering from within. Every harmful action I've done with my body, speech, and mind, overwhelmed by attachment, anger, and confusion, I hope. So, and this is what I meant. It's to I was first told that in the Tibetan or the Sanskrit, it means to split open and make known. Confession means that, to be aware of what we've done, to be aware of something, and we can think, I'm aware of that. That was unskillful. Not that was bad. That was unskillful. It caused somebody, I said something that caused somebody to feel uncomfortable or quite bad, and that was unskillful. So in that sense, it's not I'm bad because they do it. It was just an unskillful action. In fact, Buddhism isn't really about good and bad. It's about skillful and unskillful action. The equivalent of good and bad, you do something skillful, it brings a positive result. Unskillful brings a negative result, etc. You could still call it positive and negative. You who are the bright lights of the world in the 10 directions, who have attained Buddha's omniscience through the stages of wondering, all of you who are my guides, please turn the wheel of Dharma. Oh no, we missed rejoicing, which is so important. I lift up my heart and rejoice in all the positive potential. That's stupid children right there. Positive potential instead of karma. Of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions, of solitary realizers, hearers still training, and those gone beyond, and of all ordinary beings. Rejoicing is such a powerful practice. So the seventh in prayer has the whole path, doesn't it? The whole path to practice. That's why it's so important to recite it every day. You don't have to recite this version. There's a very short version. With palms together, I earnestly request you who may actualize parinirvana, please stay with us for eons, numberless as atoms of the world, for happiness and well-being of all wonders in samsara. Whatever slight positive potential I may have created, paying homage, offering, and acknowledging my faults, rejoicing and requesting that the Buddhas stay and teach, I now dedicate all this for the full awakening. May you Buddhas now living in the worlds of the 10 directions, and all you gone to freedom in the past accept my offerings. May those not arisen quickly perfect their minds, awakening as fully enlightened ones. May all worlds in 10 directions be pure and vast. May they be filled with bodhisattvas, surrounding Buddhas gathering beneath a Bodhi tree. May as many beings as exist in the 10 directions be always well and happy. May all samsaric beings live in accord with the Dharma, and may their every Dharma wish be fulfilled. Shall we save that so we can come back to that maybe at the end or whatever. We'll do a different dedication. So anyway, so basically all the things that were being taught by Lama Zopa Rinpoche was with Samantabhadras, who I'd never even heard of Samantabhadra back there. I heard of him more through my Chinese Buddhist friends. And now my Chinese Buddhist friend, who's still a monk after all those years, he's translated the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is the biggest undertaking you could possibly do. Because the version, and he doesn't say that out of just, the version that's out by Thomas Cleary, it's completely inaccurate. He borrowed from the sacred books of the East, a lot of the translation. But Mitra was hired by a Japanese publishing company to translate the whole thing, and he's been working on it for years. And I can get you all a copy of it for free. Everything my friend Mitra does is he refuses to sell. And even he had to fight. He had to fight with this Japanese, because he's a tenuous situation. He doesn't have any doctorate degrees. He was a monk all those years. His Chinese is top, So he made sure that, okay, I will translate this, but everybody can have it free in PDF. How many publishers would allow that? But he says, no, you want me to translate that? It should be free for the people, especially for monks and nuns, but for everybody. But of course, if you buy the book, it's all, there's a print for, you have to pay for the print on demand. But anyway, he's still working on it. It's been working on for years. And he says just to go through it again with the great scholars of the world will take some time. Yeah, this is one of my oldest friends. He was one of the monks at the monastery in 1968, when I was totally blown out. I went and visited, and then from that time, I knew I was going to be a monk someday, but not quite in that tradition. Yeah, so I can already send you another things. He's translated all the works of Nagarjuna that don't exist in the Tibetan tradition. They don't even have it, these beautiful tomes. One is called the Dajadulan in Chinese, the Madhyamaka Upadesha of Nagarjuna. Doesn't exist in the Tibetan canon at all. But he's translated it. And on one side is the Chinese, or ancient Chinese and the modern Chinese, and he's gone through the whole huge works. And all that is available. I can send you the PDFs for all that. I know from the Singapore group, one of the women who did my Tara retreat, she's a very serious Dharma student, so she was so happy to get all those because she can read them in Chinese. But anyway, that's Samantabhadra. The Avatamsaka Sutra is the Sutra of Samantabhadra. The Lotus Sutra is the Sutra of Avalokiteshvara. In Chinese Buddhism, they tend to, and it's Chinese Buddhism, it all comes from the original India. It's not something they made up, but they tend to catalog it by sutra schools. Avatamsaka Sutra, around that, there's a school. The Lotus Sutra, around that's at a school, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a Pure Land school. And Bob Thurman once said, well, if you said, we don't do that in Tibetan Buddhism, but if you wanted to say there was maybe a school, you'd say maybe it's coming from the Prajnaparamita, the Heart Sutra. That's the sutra. Fundamentally, we base it on. When you study in the Tibetan monasteries as a monk, you used to parchen for 7 years. That's Prajnaparamita. 7 years they study that, and then they study Madhyamaka after that for 5. A lot of academics there, parchen. So anyway, Rinpoche was teaching that from the beginning at Kopan, planting those seeds in the mind. I'll take this down so we can see what's happening now. What do I have to do that? Okay. Yeah, and then you realize later how rich it was you were getting. You don't have a clue at the time, More and more and more that plants a seed. That's why sometimes you go to teachings and you don't understand a word they're saying. But it comes through. Somehow. Did somebody say something? I'm sure happy to answer questions anywhere along here. Anytime. Okay, that was just some comment. So anyway, the 7 emperor is why I like to include it. Well, we do include it in all of our practices, but it's a very abbreviated one. But the one I use is the one of the Dalai Lama when he was 17 years old, when he was a teenager. The one he used is they begged him to do to write a sadhana about himself, and he says, I can't write a sadhana about myself. Like that's outrageous. That would be so no. I can't write a sadhana about me. No, no, dude, no, And they begged him. So he wrote the Union of the Spiritual Master and Avalokiteshvara. Probably many of you are familiar with it. And and he also, when he was this young boy, he wrote this 7-limb prayer, and I love to use it because it's so clean. Not only is it profound, it's eloquent, and he gets some of the points that he writes it in a way that, wow, he got the point, by practicing those different limbs of the 7-limb prayer, you have all of the limbs for creation of spiritual momentum or merit. You have the ones for purifying. So the Dharma practice is about those two, isn't it? It's about a purification and attainment of merit. And they're opposite sides of the same coin. So the prostrating and the giving is merit, and then there's purification, etc. And this is the path. Sangye, Chodam Soki Chodam La. Sangye, the Tibetan word for Buddha, is Sang, one who is purified, all that needs to be purified, and Ge is the one who has attained all of the positive, like Geluk, also the virtuous path, the path of merit, So one side is what is made pure, everything that needs to be made pure, and taking on all of the positive. So becoming a Buddha, the whole path is about that, isn't it? And it's all in the 7-limb prayer. It's why you should read a short version of it every day, no matter what you do. Do that, please. You don't have to read the one from the King of Prayers. There's a little short one. Because you have all those limbs, and basically what Rinpoche was teaching that without saying this is the 7-limb prayer. He taught about how to make offerings and do all these things. And how to do that in a way, like Samanta Bhadra told us, is expanding them infinitely. I always give the example. It's so simple. You can give a piece of bread to a beggar. You can give some food to a beggar. And that's a virtuous action. I think I say this whenever I teach, so you probably heard it when I was giving teachings before. That's a virtuous action. If you do it without showing off, thinking, oh, I'm great, I'm giving something to a beggar. But Samanta Bhadra's way, which Rinpoche was teaching, but from coming from Samanta Bhadra, you give something to someone, you give a bit of food to a poor person. And when you do that, you imagine in your imagination that you're feeding the entire universe. I'm feeding everybody in the universe by this action. And the imprint that goes, your karmic imprint is that you fed the whole universe. It's not, you didn't just, you get a little positive karma for giving bread. You just fed the whole universe. This is how Rinpoche got where he was. It's how he practices. Merit. He loves it. That's how you expand everything. And it's so simple, isn't it? But there has to be the bread. There always has to be some object, just like to give a mandala. Sometimes you put a little grain of rice in your hand. There should be something there that you really offer. And then when you do the mandala, also you expand it. And he was teaching water bowls, Rinpoche, at that first course. You do the water bowls, and then you think of that as being 1,000, 1,000,000 times 1,000, million water bowls. Everything you do, you imagine it being multiplied. And we have the power to do that. Just use our imagination in a little more dharmic way. No problem imagining that. We're very good at imagining, very good at visualizing. It's all we do. It's a matter of putting it in the right channel. So that 7-limb prayer contains everything. So if we want to have a human rebirth, the cause for getting a human rebirth is morality, isn't it? Ahimsa, non-harming. If you don't harm and you follow the path of ahimsa, you'll get born human. But being born human isn't enough. It's not enough to be born human. There are some really crappy, low down, horrible human rebirths. Just because you got a human rebirth, you could imagine all the horrible conditions on the planet that people get born in. Horrible. So not good enough. So to be born human and have all the other things you need, a good place, a good environment, everything, is generosity. Not harming plus generosity, because giving gives you all the things that you need by being generous. And as we know from generosity, it isn't just giving in the paramita of generosity. It's not just giving morsels of bread or offerings to the offering plate. It's about giving help, giving fearlessness. It's called helping helping the little old lady across the street because she's afraid. You give fearlessness. You help people from being afraid. You help them. That's a great gift, not just material giving. And of course, the greatest gift is giving the Dharma. If you give the Dharma to someone, you give a bit of Dharma to someone, something that can change their mind, something they can use, something that contains emptiness. To be Buddha Dharma, it has to contain Shunyata, isn't it? That's the bottom line for Buddha Dharma. But the four seals make something Dharma. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. You teach the impermanence of things. Everything is nothing existing from its own side, empty. Afflicted minds lead to suffering. Minds that are full of attachment, aversion, pride, jealousy lead to suffering. The removal of those afflictions is peace. Nirvana is peace. So all the path is pretty simply laid out, Lama Yeshe always used to say, it's so simple, isn't it? All these profound things, you can make them elaborate and complicated. And this is where you have to be a little careful about getting too caught up in literal spiritual materialism. It's the Buddha said that there should be no mere rite and ritual. And a lot of people that I know that practice the Vipassana, the Satipatthana, they say, no rite and ritual. The Buddha said no rite and ritual. He said no mere rite and rituals. Ritual rites and rituals that have meaning, that have symbolize for us, then they have meaning. But if we're just collecting a lot of other culture, then even Lama Yeshe used to scold against that. He'd say, you people are too much, You people are too much. He said, you give up all of these from your own culture. You give up all of these wonderful things that make life easy and convenient and clean. You give them up, and then you take all the worst things from our culture, a certain kind of shirts or dirty breast strings around your neck, all this stuff. You take on all the Tibetan stuff instead of keeping what's good from your culture and taking the essence from our culture, which is the Dharma, not all of the Tibetan shirts and all this stuff like that. You people are so silly. Yeah. So, but a perfect, precious human rebirth isn't good enough. One of the aspects, no, precious human rebirth is good enough. But a human rebirth with everything you need isn't good enough. What's the thing that's missing? What are the richnesses? You're born in a place that still has Dharma living. You have a Dharma where it's still being taught, and you have a place and then where you can still practice it. You can still find a teacher who can communicate it to you. So not only that, you do the purification and you do the merit, but you make prayers to meet the Guru, to meet the Dharma in a pure form in the next birth. And the Dalai Lama, when he was 19 years old, I won't read his whole 7-limb prayer, but for the requesting prayer, there's the skillfulness of this young kid, I request you to awaken every living being from the sleep of ordinary and instinctive defilements with the divine music of the Dharma's pure truth, resounding with the melody of profoundness and peace, and in accordance with the dispositions of your various disciples. That's His Holiness got that at 19 years old. It's not good enough to just meet the greatest being, the Ling Rinpoche, or this great being. You want to meet one you can communicate with. Lama Yeshe used to talk about communication, communication. It's all about communication, isn't it? Yeah, because just some being who's the highest being and knows everything and has all the powers, we need someone who can communicate it to us. The communication connection is important. And the Dalai Lama got that. So for the various disciples, they all have different. That's why it's so important, you know? It's not a cookie cutter package deal. And Lama Yeshe was so good at communicating with people. He wouldn't give the same teaching to two different people, same like the Buddha. He wouldn't give the same teaching to different people. For example, when everybody was going to do Vajrasattva retreat, the whole essence of the thing was Lama Yeshe's way, and this is what coming out of Kopan, he said, Lam Rim, Lam Rim, Lam Rim, and Vajrasattva, not just Vajrasattva, but Haruka Vajrasattva. That's what he taught. But he added that in. We didn't really know what that meant yet. But so that was his two-pronged path. And then there was a friend of mine, a very good friend, who was a good student. He became a monk. We were monks at the same time for some years. I was 15 years a monk. I think I might have outlasted him. I didn't become a monk till quite after this period of my Kopan courses. And so he knew this one person, this friend of mine, Pelge, he hated all the rituals. He hated all this stuff. And there was a lot of things about the Dharma. There's no way he could do Vajrasattva. We'd have a deity on his crown, you know, with things coming down from the deity into his head, you know. No, I couldn't do that. And so Lama Yeshe says, no, you don't do that. The whole Sangha did this retreat. And he says, no, you meditate on the 12 links of dependent origination. You do that for 3 months. That's exactly what you need. Because he knew he would just bounce off all of the rituals and the bells and dorjies and everything. And so that's what's so important. A Lama, someone who communicates with us, they know what we need and where we're, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. I love all the rituals and everything, but if you know what they mean, but you get the idea. He would teach different for different people exactly according. And I've said this before. He understood the different propensities of his different students. So that's how you get the precious human rebirth, is by also, besides purification, besides merit, getting born human, you need to get born with all the things you need. In Tibetan, the precious human rebirth is daljor. That means leisure, free time, and endowments. And endowments are all the other good things. Non-defective body, meeting the Dharma, all these treasures that come together, including a visa for India. If you can't, you have to leave your retreat without a visa. That's why Geshe Dargi says you also need a visa. You know, you need the Commonwealth passport or get born Indian. That's another reason for Dharma centers. Lama Yeshe saw that, you know, people can't stay in the East forever. People like me wanted to stay in the East forever. I still do. It's my home, although I'm kicked out now. It's been very, very weird not knowing when I could go back to India, when they will allow my long visa to be utilized again. It's very frightening. So it's very nice to have an opportunity to do things like this, to discuss the Dharma with you and these things online. And I've been doing it in different places. I do a couple of TAR sessions per week from the same sadhana. We go through that, and you're all welcome to participate in that if you want, twice a week. And no, I've started with Lam Rim on 1 day a week. But anyway, that's another reason we need Dharma centers, because we can't all stay in the East. Or we don't have the leisure to hang out in the East, not hang out, to practice and cultivate. We've got to have a job. We've got to take care of other things. When people ask, what's the what's the thing about being a monk or a nun? What's the main thing? What's the main reason? It's Dal Jor, isn't it? It's like, what are the two things that take up all of our time and psychic energy and everything? Job and relationship. You take away no job, no relationship, you got a lot of leisure time to cultivate Dharma. Oh, that takes up everything. So that's the point. It's not being celibate because in fact, even in the vows of when the Buddha didn't have any vows at the beginning, there wasn't a celibacy we see vow, not because it's dirty or this or that. That wasn't the point, because there's nothing that's good, bad in Buddhism. It's our attachment to it, and that's only because there's a hell of a lot of attachment for that. That's why it's the problem. But anyway, he didn't have vows, and where the vow of celibacy came from is there was one of his monks, one of his followers, his wife came and begged him, please allow him to come back and give me a child. No, she didn't have a child. Please, he can come back and give me a child. Because in India, to this day, if you don't have a son, that's it. There's a woman without any son to support, etc., etc. It's still that kind of culture. So the Buddha allowed this one to go, and he didn't come back. He went and created, got into it, became a household, and all the temptations there. So then he made a vow, okay, celibacy, relationship, and job. And monks aren't supposed to work. They're supposed to be actually totally supported. It's in degenerate times when you have to go out and get a job when you're a monk. I had to do it and other people had to do it. I don't know how it went for you, but you got one anyway. The FPMT will give you a job. We got you now. You go and run a center. But Lama, I just want to go do retreat. Okay, you run a center and you get more merit than you can go do retreat after 20 years. That's what's happening, isn't it? Isn't it, Lozo? It's the kind of, maybe I don't know your story, but that's the story with a lot of friends of mine. So yeah, FPMT Incorporated, they'll give you a job. They think, I'm going to be a monk or nun now and just practice. If you were really qualified to just go off and be a practitioner, he would allow you to do it. We wouldn't get a job like that, but we're not. Lama Yeshe said, he had everybody. When I was a monk, you did 2 months retreat a year. You don't take off time from the monastery. 2 months a year. When I was in the land of monk, we did retreat, minimum. He's considered that kind of a minimum. And it's a minimum for any human being, Buddhist or not, to take a couple of weeks off every once in a while and get away from their wife, their husband, their everything. Even if they're just reading poems in the woods, you need that to stay sane, So, but Lama Yeshe said 2 months is about the longest that any of you can do a retreat without starting to meditate on your delusions, thinking about other things, isn't it? Sometimes we can't even make it 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes time to get it down to that. We don't have to feel bad about that, but that takes time. So to get down to that space. And then there was this thing going on. I was complete with Lama Yeshe, but I did a Nundro, my Nundro practice I had a commitment from the former Karmapa. And so I did the whole Nundro with prostrations and everything, but that was coming out of the Kagyu tradition. And there's this whole thing, everybody going around 3-year retreat, 3-year retreat, 3-year retreat. I want to do a 3-year retreat. I know people did a 3-year retreat. They came out not much different. Because as Lama Yeshe says, for most of us, anything over 2 months, you're just thinking about things. You're meditating on your delusions. And the Dalai Lama, because 3 years, 3 months, 3 days is supposed to be the minimum time you could get enlightened in one life. It's theoretically impossible to get enlightened in one life. It is possible, and we should keep that in mind. But that means you probably practiced a lot in your past lives to get up to that point, isn't it? So it isn't like it just in this life, boom. So the Dalai Lama said, I heard him say in the teachings, Enlightenment in 3 years, 3 months, 3 days. He says, it sounds like Chinese propaganda to me. Dalai Lama always just, he's so funny. He's right to the point, you know? So anyway, but there was this, everybody going off to do their retreats when they're not ready. And I know a friend who did a couple of them even. And so Lozong, you're probably going to have to labor away for another so many years before you get to go off and do your retreat. And you will build up the merit to be able to keep your mind more quiet, hopefully, if you don't let the job get to you, like that. Okay, Babylon, as usual, but I go off on tangents, but so do my gurus. I don't go off nearly like Lama Zopa goes off, but hopefully it's all Dharma. That's the main thing. But all that came from Kopan and the experience of Kopan, which is the root. And still people do Kopan courses. And it changes their lives because it's an intense experience where you're submerged for an entire month with the precepts and everything. So we'll just do a simple dedication. Oh, we'll do Shanti Devas also because it's so powerful. So by virtue of doing this practice, may we immediately, may we become Buddha and lead all sentient beings to the state of Buddhahood. And that in Tibetan is Gewadi Lama Buddha. Gewadi Lama Sangye Drugyune Doa Chi Kyang Malupa De Sala Gopasho. May the bodhicitta which has not arisen in our minds, may it arise, and may that which has arisen, never decrease and go on increasing more and more and more. Jangchub Semcho Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Yuchik, Ke Panyam Pame Paryang, Gone Gondu Pewa Show. So we've run out of time. It's exactly 7:30. Do you prefer I read Shani Davis' dedication? Or do you want to just be free now from whatever?
You can screen share it if you'd like.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can do it. So I got a copy. I just like to do it. It's such a beautiful dedication. And especially our practice, I do this Tara practice with people because His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, do Tara practice. The best antidote to the COVID situation is doing Tara practice. So I've been leading that twice a week ever since he said that. And there's a group of people. And when you read Shanti Deva's dedication, it's perfect for it. The words are perfect for an antidote to the dedication to overcome this disease. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, attain an ocean of joy, ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored upon finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid. May those bound be freed. May the powerless find power. And may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world, in the land encircled by snow mountains. You are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenre Zig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. O Gangri Rawe Korwe Jinkam Dir Pendang Dewa Malu Jungwe Ne Chenre Zigwan Tenzin Gyatso Yi Shape Site Bardu Ten Yurchi. Okay. So how do I get back to that best? I'll just go to this one again. Oh, you go here. Okay. So I have it turns out it's coming very soon. I didn't realize it's next Friday, if that's the 4th. Out of Tushita online, they're doing something for the Day of Miracles. And so on the 4th is the second day. And I have been asked to give a teaching all about Lama Yeshe. It's called Big Love, and all about the life of Lama Yeshe and all the stories and all the interactions and the way he taught and everything. So it would be great if you wanted to join. It's kind of an elaboration on what we did here, because we focus mostly to Kopan. But this is really, it's very important to me, because there was one that was canceled a year ago, and it was some very strange obstacles. And so I'll be glad to be doing that again. I have to start at 7:30 in the morning to do it at 7 p.m. in Dharamsala. So that'll be a little hard to get up the energy at 7:30 in the morning. I'll get up at 3 or something to try to get into the mode. You know me, at the evening I get more, I can carry on more. And so if you want to join through Tushita, that would be great. And it's all about Lama Yeshe, all my experiences with Lama Yeshe. Try to remember. A few came up just now even. So much love to all of you. Thank you very much for your patience. It's really great doing things with you. I'm very happy to be a part of your center. I've been invited to be a part of the center. So we'll do more things in the future, no doubt about it. My plans are after about 10 days, I'll be going to Mexico, because I have to find places to stay. I'm a refugee. So one of my wonderful students from a Tara retreat, a Mexican woman, she's given me a house in Puerto Vallarta so I can go stay there. It'll have Wi-Fi, so anything can be done on Wi-Fi. And I can still be reached and do my little groups every week. And I will be connected. And as I've said before, anytime any of you, some people have contacted me who met me during the course of Four Noble Truths. I stay in touch with them. I'm available all the time to elaborate and give individual discussions of things. I get to learn from you just as much as you from me. It's an honor to be able to do that. And it gives my life meaning. Otherwise, I just waste time. I just sit there and watch YouTube all the time, you know. And not just Buddhism. I watch all the nonsense, get all involved. So all the vaccine stuff and all the Russia stuff and all the way, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So anytime you want to do, please connect with me. I think you have my email, and we could communicate on Skype and do one. I've done it with a few people already, and they want to do something in the future. Or you could join the Tara a couple of times a week and just do the Tara sadhana, which includes the 7-limb puja and practice. And you don't have to come every time. You can just join. I think you have the links for that. I think they were given through somebody when I taught before. So anyway, much love to you all, and may we meet again soon. Great. And don't forget to
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you.